So I would like to, first of all, offer a warm welcome to everyone who came out on this frigid December evening to spend some time with City Commission this evening, and to call this business meeting of the City Commission to order for Monday, December 19th, 2022. First item of business is roll call. Clerk Burling.
Commissioner Decker. Present. Commissioner Hess.
Here.
Commissioner Hoffman. Commissioner Juarez.
Present.
Commissioner Pradel.
Present.
Vice Mayor Cooney.
Present.
Mayor Anderson.
Here. May I have a motion to excuse Commissioner Hoffman?
Support.
Motion made by Commissioner Decker, supported by Commissioner Pradel. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right, thank you. So we are blessed this evening that for our opening ceremony, we have my good friend Deacon Joe Schmidt here. Welcome. Joe and I served for quite a few years together on the Public Housing Commission. And I'm going to ask you to stand when Deacon Joe provides an invocation, and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Welcome, Deacon Joe.
Thank you. It's a privilege. I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't really believe in coincidences. I see them as God acting anonymously in my life. And this morning when I walked into the YMCA, on the board was a quote from a Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. And it's a simple quote, but especially this time of the year when it's so dark, it makes sense. A little bit of light dispels a lot of darkness. And on my way in, I couldn't help but notice how these tiny little lights on people's homes just illumine the darkness. And then 3 runners came alongside of the road wearing these, I don't know what they are, but they're really bright lights. And it was amazing how they illumined the darkness. And I thought to myself, isn't that what we elect commissioners for? To bring light into our darkness, our lives. And so I pray that the Lord blesses each of you with the ability to see the light that you are in our community and to lead us to the common good. And we ask this in the name of whatever you see as your divine presence in your life. Amen.
Thank you once again for getting us off on the right foot here. Deacon Joe, I appreciate your presence. Commissioners, you have before you the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any changes you'd like to see? Commissioner Pradel?
Yeah, I'd like to ask.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Once again, serving a great public good is something that I missed here and was just reminded by the good attorney to my left. And that is, so do we have a proclamation?
Introduction of guests.
Yeah, we have introduction of guests. There we go. That's what I thought. So, not only are we kind of blessed by being here together and getting to do this work in this great country we live in, but we have some very esteemed and honored guests with us here this evening. And it was brought to my attention by a Eagle Scout here on the dais, that Troop 205 is with us here this evening. And as a matter of fact, my predecessor, Bobby Hopewell, was also a member of Troop 205 and was also an Eagle Scout. So you're doing something right. That's all I can say. Eagle Scout, I will use the appropriate terminology there. Pradel, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. It's so good to see you guys out there from Troop 205. I'm a proud Troop 205 alum, and Mayor mentioned, former Mayor Bobby Hopewell was a 205 alum. I am so blessed, the opportunities I was given and granted as a young person. I can almost certainly guarantee you I would not be involved in local government as an elected official if it wasn't for my time as a young scout. So many opportunities to travel and see the world and the country, and then an opportunity to create relationships and friendships that exist still today. I still am very close to a number of my former scout leaders, do breakfast and lunch with them regularly, and so it's really cool to see you guys here tonight working to learn a little bit more about our local government. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Commissioner Pradel, and welcome. All right, now back to our regular agenda here. So any changes, and I know Commissioner Pradel, you have one.
Yeah, I was going to ask to move G7 just to the regular agenda tonight, just because I thought that was an interesting topic for the community to learn about from Director Baker, if you don't mind. So.
Okay, great. Any other changes from Commission? All right, I guess we're set. So the agenda is set here. Let me see. I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. I'm getting help from both sides tonight. I am reminded that it's now time to ask if there's anybody in the audience who would like to move an item from the consent agenda to the regular agenda. All right, see no one, well then we're set. Communications.
I have nothing, Your Honor.
So next is an opportunity for public comments. Speakers will each have 3 minutes for their comments, and please don't go longer than that. The microphone does turn off at 3 minutes. We will start with in-person speakers, so anyone here in the chambers would like to speak, and then we will go to call-in speakers. People who want to offer comments by calling in should call 888-382-9556, starting now through the end of the public comment period. So please, anyone who's in the chambers who'd like to speak, please come forward.
Okay. It's kind of intimidating with the minutes like ticking down in front of you.
Don't look at it.
Well, I kind of timed it out. So my name is Alan. I'm actually surprised to see some of your faces in the mayor's office because I moved out of Kalamazoo 20 years ago, and I think you guys were just getting started on the city commission, if I'm not incorrect. Some of my friends, some of my friends were running for city commission in the early 2000s when I left. And since then, I've been in about a dozen countries, short of a dozen, and surprised to see that not a lot has changed in Kalamazoo. Could be a good thing, but I've seen in other countries, I've lived in a lot of third world countries in particular, where local governments are doing a lot of things for their citizens. In Mexico, for example, they close down the roads on the weekends for bikers to go through, recognizing that bikers are an existing population, right? I'm saying this in comparison because I think Kalamazoo is a city with potential. It's a city that Barack Obama, the president of the US, chose to visit specifically. It has 3 institutions of higher learning, which means it has a constant influx of bright minds and some hefty wallets, right? I'm surprised to see what seems to be, in comparison, maybe unfairly, a lot of squandered potential because I've seen what other countries have done at the local government level. For example, here 20 years ago is almost when they put in the movie theater downtown, which is now closed, right? It was a bad idea, it seemed at the time, and the reality has hit us now. But I do see things like a heavy police presence, which I know is Mayor Anderson's a preference. It doesn't make me personally feel safe. I get eyeballed and my stuff still gets stolen, and then a black person or a homeless person gets harassed and doesn't resolve anything, right? But we do, I mentioned the homeless population, that is an issue that I think we could address at the city government level. Rents are at about $1,500 a month for students. I know because I just moved back and I looked, but wages still haven't gone above $10 an hour. And just a couple weeks ago, the Downtown Economic Growth Authority decided to host a dining and shopping event for the businesses. The same businesses that won't pay a living wage, that make workers work a limited amount of hours part-time so they don't have to provide benefits like health care. And these are things that I think we could be doing at the local government level to kind of incentivize them to do more for the general population than what they seem to be doing right now. What I'm wondering, I know you have lots of board meetings and lots of meetings in general, but what can citizens do in general?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, City officials. John Allen, 3412 Bronson Boulevard. Here again to talk about transparency and accountability on the Bronson Boulevard redesign plan, or as we like to call it, the Bronson Boulevard Preservation Plan. Your survey takes false credit for more than 20 hours of public comment, even though no public comment is permitted on that survey or anywhere else. At 3 minutes a clip here, I'd have to come to every city commission meeting for about the next 16.4 years to equal that. So we hope we can find another method of being able to make more extensive comments available to you. We are puzzled that we can't get the 18 safety metrics that are required by your own streets policy. They would show Bronson Boulevard is already safe, not a single bike or pedestrian accident in over 100 years. But now you want to put down 8 to 10 miles of paint, 2-mile road, 4 to 5 paint markings, all along the way. And that road paint cannot improve on Bronson's perfect safety record. But drinking water is contaminated by road paint. It's chemicals, it's VOCs, arsenic, some cancer causing. U.S. Department of Transportation has done a big study on this. It's in the materials I will leave for you. And we're also puzzled that there's no environmental impact study, which is, I think, required to meet the federal statutory standard, which is minimize environmental contamination, not restrict it, minimize it. It's inconceivable you would spend tens of millions of dollars on thousands of gallons of road paint and not assemble those safety metrics and the environmental study. We've asked for them repeatedly. We've received nothing. Would you pour 10,000 gallons of paint down the untreated stormwater drain that goes directly into the aquifer sources of our drinking water? Of course not. But that's exactly where all the road paint ends up going. Whether it's weather or traffic or plowing, it all ends up going down there, and in a few years, it's gone, and so you paint all over again with even more paint. That deserves study. The issue for you to decide, how much drinking water contamination are you willing to cause and accept to put paint down on a street that your own metrics would show is already safe? We would ask you that you adopt our 4 easy step interim solution, take down the survey, take down the plan. We need to start over, publish the 18 baseline metrics and the environmental impact data, and after that, then hold some real public meetings where some real public comment can be received, and a much better proposal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, please.
My name is Elizabeth Kratz, and I'm also here to speak to the Bronson Boulevard proposed changes. I also serve on the board of the Lakeside Beach Corporation, one of the neighborhood associations. First, though, I want to say in the process of requesting a paper copy of the survey, I had the opportunity to speak with a gentleman, I believe his name was Nolan, at the City Planning Commission. He was truly the epitome of a civil servant. He truly listened to me. He shared information on some of the city's concerns. The two of us had a very cordial exchange of ideas, and that's something that seems increasingly rare. Please, Nolan deserves a raise or at least a good holiday bonus. I know that bike lanes are planned. Please, no ballards. They contribute to the perception of lanes being narrowed. I know perception is not reality, but all humans respond to perceived reality the same way they respond to reality. I have 2 teenagers who are working on their level 1 driving license, and I can see them when for every inch a lane narrows, their anxiety goes up. And when a situation comes that requires some judgment, they may not have the bandwidth to calculate that quickly. And you and I are experienced drivers. I think we would handle that just fine. But it's those at the extremes of the driving career, novice drivers like my 2, and those who might be nearing the end of their driving days. And Bronson Boulevard has a skews very high toward the elderly population. So anything we can do to preserve the perception that there's no restriction on those lanes. Paint, that's great, but ballards, no. I think that would present a driving hazard, at least for my 2. And they're very good drivers, I will say. And it is just paint. Please follow up after the changes have been instituted with a survey seeking comment from the residents, gathering feedback after a reasonable period of time. And if revisions are warranted, please consider including some members of the neighborhood from the ground up on planning rather than seeking input on plans after they've been drawn up. Thank you all very much for your service, and I wish you a Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
I'm Steve Barber. I live at 532 Montrose in Kalamazoo. I don't know a lot about this, but I have some thoughts and comments regarding Chief Coakley. When I got to know Chief Coakley, only in a couple of opportunities, I was impressed. I liked him. Thought he was a nice guy, and I thought he changed, and I don't know him as a police officer other than that, but I'm concerned about what's going on, and I don't know much about it. I was a school administrator for many, many, many years, and we dealt with a lot of things, and when harassment occurred, one of the things we always knew, we knew what harassment was and what it wasn't, and those are important distinctions. Often things like harassment and other things that occur in the staff are an opportunity to improve, are an opportunity to look at what you're doing. Because one of the things we know is harassment of any kind is never allowed. And what we want to do is build a group that works together well and accomplishes the goals. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share. I'm concerned, but I know you have a job and I know it's in the process, but I got to throw my thoughts out there for consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Bear. I'm a resident of Kalamazoo. Thank you for your time tonight. I'm here as a resident of Kalamazoo and a representative of Mode Shift Kalamazoo, and I'd like to voice my support tonight for the proposed bicycle and pedestrian improvements to Bronson Boulevard. I've been very supportive, and our organization has been very supportive of the work that city staff has been doing on making the street safer for everyone. The recent street improvements have made it safer for my family to bike for transportation, from the daily school run to picking up groceries, and to my wife's daily commute through downtown for work. We have felt safer going where we need to go. This increased safety is especially welcome when transporting my 4-year-old daughter. I also want to add there's much more work to do in this arena. In our car, we also feel safer moving through downtown. When it's clear what is car space and what is bike space, everyone's experience is improved. City streets belong to all city residents, and all city residents deserve to safely move through the city across all neighborhoods, no matter what mode of transportation they choose. I ride my bike through 4 different neighborhoods to get to school, and neighborhoods are connected, and I think transportation happens across them, and the planning should be comprehensive, combining neighborhoods. I think the issue of road paint contamination is a red herring. I don't think we fix environmental damage or climate change by maintaining the cars-only transportation status quo. There is a massive amount of drinking water contamination that happens across our cities from the existence of cars and the pollution they cause. So are we safe on the streets of our neighborhoods? Or are there few incidents of bikers and walkers being hit by cars in our neighborhoods because few people of all ages, from age 8 to 80, people aren't actually biking and walking as much as they would be if they were safer? I want to thank you for your time. I also want to raise the idea, someone just spoke about concern for their children learning how to drive and safety issues around the city. I think some cities around the country and around the world are starting to have citywide speed limits reduced, and I think that would make young drivers and old drivers alike feel safer, for instance, having a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit across the city. So thank you to the city staff for the work they've done to make it feel safer for me and my family to get around on bicycle and foot in the city.
Thank you very much. Yes, next, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak to you. My name is Wilson. I live on 715 Edgemore Avenue, so very close to Bronson Boulevard. And my comment is about Bronson Boulevard redesign as well. So ever since I moved to 715 Edgemore, my family and I have been biking everywhere, and we have really kind of taken a bike-centric lifestyle. We still have our cars, but we take our bike usually for trips under 20 miles. So just kind of give you a glimpse of what my day is like. So every morning I would take my 4-year-old, we would ride on our cargo bike to Kazoo School all the way down Bronson Boulevard. And then we also take Bronson Boulevard connected with Crosstown Parkway to go downtown for dance class, for library, for Rocket Fizz, when they need to get their sugar fixed. So when we talk about how a city makes us feel, right? When we talk about a city that is well known for their feelings, Paris, for example, we don't really talk about, hey, their water is not as good, right? Or they don't have as many, homeless people. But when we do land on there, we do see a lot of people biking in a highly dense urban environment. And we do see that people are happy, walking their street, going to their local places without the pressure, having to drive to own a car. Car ownership is really expensive. We know that because we have 2 cars and they're just sitting in the garage right now. I'm still paying a ton of money, for their upkeep, for their insurance, etc. But in my opinion, Kalamazoo hasn't achieved a level where I can give up those cars completely because I don't feel safe sometimes riding on the street, especially with my kids. So when you talk about, like Deacon Joe mentioned, runners wearing really bright lights, right? Why do those runners wear bright light when they're running? They're exercising, they're enjoying themselves, precisely because they're afraid of getting hit by cars. They want to be visible. Why do we have to depend on light to keep us safe? Why can't we build barriers to keep us safe? Why can't we build dedicated lanes for people to enjoy themselves around the city? When you talk about how a city makes you feel, I shouldn't feel unsafe running at night and have to wear a bright light. I should feel very safe. I should feel like I can go anywhere, and this is my community right here. And also when we talk about using paint for the bike lane, if paint is causing pollution, let's just not use paint. Let's put planters and then let's plant something, concrete barrier, something extremely safe, I mean, after all, like, what can you do once, if someone get hit by a car, right? Because they couldn't see, because the car is in the way, to me, it just
Thank you. Your 3 minutes are up. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes, next, please.
Good evening, everybody, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Steve Glista. I'm a Kalamazoo resident at 2336 Midvale Terrace. And I'm here tonight to talk about transportation dignity. There's a rite of passage that I think most of us are familiar with that occurs in early in the teen years in most people's lives. And I've been thinking about it a lot lately as my oldest son is now 14 years old. I'm going to ask you to think back on what it was like to be 13 or 14 and think about wanting to be out with your friends. You want to go see a movie. Or think about trying to go on that first date with someone and you're 15 years old and you want to ask somebody out. And you have to have that inevitable conversation, right? Well, my mom can drive us there if your mom can pick us up. You can't be responsible for your own transport until you have a car. And that's a choice that we have made in the way we've developed our infrastructure here, that people can't truly be independent. People can't safely move around the community because we haven't built infrastructure that supports their ability to move around independently with dignity. So I want to thank the city of Kalamazoo for the investments that we've made so far in building infrastructure and setting aside infrastructure that can be used by people who either don't have access to their own vehicle, whether it's because of funds or whether it's because of age or whether it's because they've had their keys taken away at the other end of the driving cycle. That's another conversation that I've been thinking about that I'm not looking forward to as my parents and other folks in our family are aging, and it's a conversation that nobody wants to have is, let's take the keys away from grandma. So I want you to think about that. Contrast the sense of, I don't want to call it shame, but the embarrassment of, well, my mom can drive us there if your mom can pick us up. And contrast that with the sense of independence and the sense of self-sufficiency that someone has when they have their own transportation independence, because that's really what we're talking about, is whether our neighbors and our friends here in Kalamazoo can be responsible for their own transportation or whether they need to rely on someone else to get them where they need to be. So again, I want to thank the city of Kalamazoo for investing in transportation independence, because that's really what this is about, is independence and dignity. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, next, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. William Rowland, Kalamazoo residents. I'm here to speak also. Don't know the gentleman, but I was happy to hear that he spoke up regarding the issue of harassment with our chief. I know that there seems to be a gag order. Nobody knows what's going on, investigation happening, but as I said last time I was here, I'm a 30-year retired employee of the city of Kalamazoo. I've known numerous chiefs. I can think of Ross, I can think of Hedrick, I can think of Ed Edwardson, I can think of Dan Weston, Carrie Ann, and Chief Coakley. Had some great opportunities to get to know some of them very well. Chief Vernon Coakley is one of those people. I think many of you saw him in the community interacting, even as far as praying with people when things were going on in this community. I'm also a former military. I'm a combat veteran, I'm a Vietnam veteran, 11 months, 19 days in that, several years other than that. And through that, I've had the privilege to walk on 5 of our 7 continents during my time in the United States, everywhere but Antarctica and Australia. I'd like to go to Australia, I don't want to go to Antarctica. Don't do well in cold. Having said that, it is my hope that we are being truly considerate and consistent with our chief, former chief, whatever the status is, and that we're giving every benefit of the doubt. When I said that former military, combat veteran, one of the things I know is that in command, you give orders. We don't like them sometimes, but we do what we need to do because we have to get certain jobs done. I can imagine that any chief that's been here could probably make that statement. I've given some directions that everybody didn't appreciate, everybody didn't want to do, but we do what we need to do when we need to get it done. And I just want to be sure that as we talk about harassment, as he said, what it is not. Our directives, harassment, is doing what I don't want to do. So I just hope that we are giving every benefit to the doubt of someone who's been serving this community very well and is respected in many circles in this community. And I just wanted to put that out there because I am one of those people who has high respect for him. I've seen him both in the workplace. I've seen him in community. I've seen him interact with young people, young men in particular. That is one of the things when I met the former Chief Carrie Ann. I met them at a time when we were dealing with some issues of a lot of high-speed traffic in the community. And I saw her and, at that time, Deputy Chief Coakley interacting with them. But I saw him interact and be very productive and very, how do I want to say, yes, very productive with it in his communication with them, with the young people. And I think that's one of the things we need to be, because we have a lot of issues with young people in this community. I woke up to some news recently of the death of the young man who was shot and killed. But still, even in my sermon on yesterday, I had to speak about that. We shouldn't have to hear those things in Kalamazoo. We're better than that. We're better than that.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the chambers that would like to make a comment?
Good evening, Jeff Messer, city resident. First, I'd like to apologize to those of you watching on Public Media Network, Facebook, YouTube, WKZO Radio, WMUK Radio, and Michigan Radio. If tonight's citizen speakers and the commission members that their voices distorted, a new audio system was put in May, and the audio has been distorted for like 6 months now. I let staff know. I watched the last meeting, the video was still distorted. It's really obvious if you listen to WKZO Radio or Michigan Radio or WMUK, because all you have is the audio to go on. So maybe if you watch the video, maybe it's not so obvious because you can see the lips moving and all that. But if you listen on the radio, it's really obvious that the audio is distorted. And I can't tell you if tonight's audio is distorted. I don't know if they fixed it. I won't know until I watch the recording later. But if it's distorted, please contact the city manager's office and ask them. I know a citizen has come up here before and complained about the audio. So the reason why I came up here tonight is to address the comments given by tonight's first speaker. I've got good news for him. A fourth operator has been found for the downtown movie theater. You're going to have to search MLive and WWMT's website. But we've had 3 previous operators of the movie theater in that location since 2005. First you had the Rave City Place 14, and then you had the Alamo Draft House, and then AMC decided they wanted to expand into the buildings that they already own, and they kicked the Alamo Draft House out. And that was a real loss for our community, because this new operator, I wish them success. It's good for our downtown, but it's not going to be like Alamo Draft House was unless they're going to be doing things like Alamo Draft House did. Secondly, the citizen was commenting on cities in Mexico. I don't know anything about local government in Mexico, but here in Michigan, we don't have what some states have, which is like, I think it's called home rule or something. Ohio has that, where the localities can do like whatever they want unless the legislature prohibits them. But this is something that City Attorney Robinson knows. For example, the citizen mentioned or seemed to be inferring that the city of Kalamazoo should have its own living wage. I'm pretty sure the Michigan legislature probably prohibits localities in the state of Michigan from enacting their own minimum wage that's higher than what the state does. So I'm not giving the city commission an excuse for failing to place the pods, the 50 pods that HRI has, and letting Snake die in MLK Park. You need to get on that. Don't let any more people die. But there is some limits on what the city commission can do in enacting local legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the chambers who'd like to speak this evening? See no one. Deputy City Manager Chamberlain, has anybody called in?
We'll go ahead and check. Hi, go ahead. You're live with the Kalamazoo City Commission.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, go ahead. You're on with the commission right now. Hello, yes, go ahead. You're with the commission right now. Go ahead and give your public comments.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ashante Collins, and I am the co-chair for the Campaign for Criminal Justice and Transparency, and I'm also the Anti-Racism Task Force lead at Isaac. Tonight, I will be reading our Isaac Executive Director, Dr. Charlotte Davis, public comment. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, and City staff. My name is Charlotte Davis. Though out of town, I wanted my public comment to be read. On this December date, our community and our city are still in pain for many reasons. And healing comes when we fully address the root of these problems. I want to unpack the beloved community that Dr. King spoke of. He said it was not devoid of conflict, but free of violence, and that practices and policies were infused with love, abundance, hope, and equity, so that all are held as beloved. We have much more to do together, and we must lean in to achieve this beloved community. While building the beloved community, we need collaboration, love, and unity. And also, love means engaging in truth-telling. Love means having those difficult conversations. Love means staying at the table through conflict. Love means addressing and dismantling systemic racism and isms. And love means standing boldly, even if you have to stand alone, to ensure our policies and practices are equitable. Anti-racism work means using that lens each and every time when examining policies and practices within our systems. So, City Commissioners, questions. Can you confirm this situation with our chief is being handled consistent with how previous situations with chiefs similar in nature have been handled? How are you ensuring this past process and current investigation were and are centered in anti-racism and equity? Manager, are you able to report as to when the investigation will conclude and share with the community, honoring confidentiality and lifting transparency? Lastly, during our Isaac Leadership Board meeting, we reflected on 2022. I want to share our questions, we debriefed, and asked these same questions of you all. As elected officials, what did you learn about yourself as someone of faith and or someone working for equity, justice, and anti-racism? How were you challenged? Where did you miss the mark in equity, justice, and anti-racism work or fall short? Where did you find victory and growth in your social justice, anti-racism, and equity journey? I invite you all to reflect with us as 2022 comes to a close. Thank you. Dr. Charlotte Davis of Isaac.
That was the last call.
Thank you very much, Deputy City Manager Chamberlain. I appreciate you handling that. Now we have come to our consent agenda. City Manager Risma.
The following items have been brought forward for approval. First is the approval of a purchase of 2 Ford F600 truck chassis from Gorno Ford through the MyDeal Cooperative Purchase Program in the amount of $116,650. Next is the approval of a 3-year small municipal and county government enterprise agreement with the Environmental Systems Research Institute, Incorporated, through the MyDeal Cooperative Purchasing Program in the amount of $143,100. Next, the approval of a 2-year contract extension with Continental Linen Services for industrial uniform rental and cleaning services for staff use within the Department of Public Services in the amount of $150,000. Next, the approval of a sole source 3-year agreement with Fleet Efficiency for GPS live tracking for city vehicles except public safety in the amount of $220,752. Next is the approval of a contract supplemental change order with Ferguson Waterworks for the advanced purchase of ductile iron pipe and appurtenances in the total amount of $280,040.50. Next is the approval of a 3-month contract extension with Alexander Chemical Corporation for the purchase of 12.5% sodium hypochlorite by volume in the amount of $289,948.75.
Next is the adoption of a resolution approving 4 new neighborhood enterprise zone homestead applications in the Vine neighborhood. Next is the adoption of a resolution recommending approval of the application from Kazu Tacos LLC for a development district liquor license located at 215 East Michigan Avenue within the city's existing downtown development district. Next is the approval of a 5-year revocable license agreement with the Kalamazoo Nature Center for a limited portion of property near the Bats driveway at 2315 Angling Road. Next is the approval of an agreement with the W. Upjohn Institute for Employment Research for a Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo High Impact Fund grant in the amount of $250,000 to assist core neighborhood families with increased access to good jobs and employer engagement in 2023. Next is the acceptance of an Ending Community Violence grant from the State of Michigan Department of Health and Human Services in the amount of $50,000 to support Urban Alliance's Change of Status program in 2023. Next is the acceptance of the 2021 Justice Assistant Grant Award from the U.S. Department of Justice in the amount of $103,751. Next is the acceptance of a 2022 Justice Assistance Grant from the U.S. Department of Justice in the amount of $113,560. And finally, approval of a request from New Year's Eve Fest of Kalamazoo to publicly display fireworks from the Epic Center parking structure on Saturday, December 31, 2022 at midnight as part of the annual New Year's Eve Fest event.
Thank you very much, Manager Ritzma. The Commissioners, the requested action is a motion to approve items 1 through 6 and 8 through 15 and authorize the city manager to sign all related documents on behalf of the city. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Juarez.
Support.
Supported by Commissioner Hess. Clerk Borling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Hess,
Yes.
Commissioner Juarez,
Yes.
Commissioner Pradel,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cooney,
Yes.
Mayor Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Commissioners. The items on the consent agenda are approved. We have several items on our regular agenda this evening. First one is item H1. Manager Ritzma.
Approval of a support service agreement with the Foundation for Excellence and the creation of a full-time equivalent position allocation for the FFE Executive Director.
Thank you very much. Is there a staff report on this item?
No, but we do have staff available if there are any questions.
Any questions, Commissioners? All right, seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment on this item? That's item H1. Please come to the podium, give us your name, and whether you live in the city. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Seeing no one at this time, the recommended action is a motion to approve the agreement and position allocation. Is there a motion? Motion made by Commissioner Decker.
Support.
Supported by Vice Mayor Cooney. Any discussion, Commissioners? All right, seeing none. Clerk Borling.
Commissioner Juarez,
Yes.
Commissioner Pradel,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cooney,
Yes.
Mayor Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Decker, Commissioner Hess.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. The agreement is approved. Next is item H2. City Manager Ritzma.
Adoption of an ordinance to amend Article 3 of Chapter 15 of the Kalamazoo City Code, Fire Prevention and Protection, to adopt the 2021 edition of the International Fire Code.
Any staff that are intending to report on this item, Manager Ritzma?
No, but we do have someone here available if there are questions.
Questions from anyone on the commission? All right, seeing none, is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment on this item? That's item H2. If so, please come to the podium, state your name, where you live in the city, and you'll have 3 minutes. Seeing no one, the recommended action is a motion to adopt the ordinance. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Hess.
Support.
Supported by Vice Mayor Cooney. Any discussion? Thank you. Clerk Borling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Pradel,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cooney.
Yes.
Mayor Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Decker. Commissioner Hess.
Yes.
Commissioner Juarez.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. The ordinance has been adopted. Next is item H3, City Manager Ritzma.
First reading of an ordinance to amend the pension ordinance regarding deferred retirement option plan.
Manager Ritzma, is there any report on this particular item?
There is none, but we do have staff available for questions.
Okay. Questions, Commission? Commissioner Pradel?
Yeah, I'd appreciate the chance just to let the public hear a little bit more about this and why we're doing this.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Pradel. I see Acting Chief Boyson is coming forward here. Thank you for being here with us.
Commissioners and City Manager, Clerk Borling. Yes, it's a pilot program that we have brought forward for a three-year pilot program. And the purpose of this is to retain our current highly trained staff so we don't lose them to retirement. This is similar to what other cities in the area are doing. Grand Rapids is doing it, Battle Creek is doing it, Michigan State Police. So if we look at our staffing, we're authorized for 268 sworn officers. Right now we're at 240, so we're 20 short. We anticipate 12 retirements in 2023. And then during the course of this three-year pilot program, we're anticipating a total of 26 retirements. So that's a lot of experience and skills that are leaving and will further create more problems with our staffing because our hiring pace cannot keep up with that level of retirement. So hopefully this will help stabilize our staffing as part of our overall strategy with our recruiting and hiring and retention to stabilize our staffing. So if you look at our applicants, they are steadily decreasing. From 2017, at that time we had 1,057 applicants to the department. And this last year in 2022, that dropped to 328 applicants. So the number of applicants is decreasing, so this would help stabilize that.
Just a follow-up question here, just for some clarification. So a public safety officer can take advantage of working for 25 years and retiring, correct? And this is a way to give people the opportunity to work longer, not being forced into that choice. Is that accurate?
Yes, they can retire after 25 years and get their full pension. They could choose to have a 1 to 3 year drop, so delayed retirement. So they could work 1 extra year, 2 extra years, up to 3 years total extra. And as what would happen is their final average compensation, their pension benefits, everything would be locked at their rate upon the entry of the drop. And then they would have the option to stay up to those 3 years and accrue their pension in a separate account while they're working, and they would withdraw that money upon exit of the drop. So basically, instead of collecting their pension right away after 25 years, it gets put aside for them and while they continue work. But again, their final average compensation for as far as their pension benefits is locked in at the date of the entry of the drop.
So really, this does not add to that pension calculation. It, in essence, puts that benefit in escrow for when they do determine that they want to retire then.
Correct.
Right?
And we did have an actuarial done, and it did not show an adverse effect on the pension fund balance. So we did look at that, and then we also brought this forward to the unions, negotiated with the unions to get this agreement as well.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Pradel, anything more? Any other questions for staff? Thank you very much, Acting Chief. So is there no questions? Now is the opportunity for anyone in the audience who'd like to comment on this item. That's item H3. If so, please come to the podium, give us your name and whether you live in the city. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Seeing no one, the recommended action is a motion to offer this ordinance for first reading. Maybe you'll be coming back to us. Is there a motion? Motion made by Commissioner Decker.
Support.
Supported by Commissioner Hess. Discussion, colleagues. Seeing none, Clerk Borling.
Vice Mayor Cooney.
Yes.
Mayor Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Decker. Yes. Commissioner Hess.
Yes.
Commissioner Juarez.
Yes.
Commissioner Pradel.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. The ordinance has been offered for first reading. Next is item H4, City Manager Ritzma.
First reading of an ordinance to amend Article 10 of Chapter 2, Employee Retirement System.
Thank you very much. I presume there's not a staff report on this, is that correct?
Right. Our city attorney is available for any questions.
All right, that's very handy, isn't it? Are there any questions for our city attorney on this? Commissioner Pradel?
Same deal. I think it'd be helpful to get some background for the public to learn a little bit more about why we're doing this.
All right, sounds good. Attorney Robinson.
Thank you, Commission. This is more of a housekeeping ordinance to make the ordinance reflect changes that have occurred. For instance, we now have a chief operating officer, and that position isn't specifically identified, so that's one change that's being made to identify that. The other change is one that's probably a little overdue. When the ordinance was initially adopted, there was a $1,000 death benefit for when a retiree passed away, ostensibly to help with funeral expenses. That hasn't changed since the 1980s, and it was recommended by our Finance Director, Management Services Director, Mr. Vicenzi, to increase that to $5,000. Again, the impact on the pension fund is negligible, and again, that's keeping in tune with the increased cost of funeral expenses, and so that's basically the two main changes that are being made to the ordinance.
Thank you, Attorney Robinson. Commissioner Pradel?
I did have one question. I noticed in the language it talks about the chief operating officer, but also it references deputy city manager, right? I happen to know we also have a assistant city manager now, so I don't know if that has any impact on it. If the language keeps it broad enough that that encompasses other positions within the city manager's office.
I think we've had assistant city managers before.
We have had, but this is a general member administrator, and for some reason, this version, it should say also assistant city manager. So that's a Scrivener's error. So we do had, the current language of the ordinance does speak to deputy city managers, but now we have an assistant city manager, and the intent was to include that position as well. So if you would pass introduce this ordinance with that change, we'll make sure it's reflected when it comes back to the commission.
Cool, thank you.
Great question, Commissioner Pradel. Any other questions for Attorney Robinson on this? Well, seeing none, is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment on this item H4? So please come to the podium, state your name, whether you live in the city, and you'll have 3 minutes. Seeing none, the recommended action is a motion to offer the ordinance, presuming that we are addressing this. Would you like to read this, Attorney Robinson, just to make sure we have the addition?
Certainly. The motion would be to amend the pension ordinance to, as introduced, with the exception to include the position of assistant city manager.
Thank you. Is there anyone like to make that motion?
So move.
Motion made by Commissioner Juarez. Supported by Commissioner Decker. Any discussion, Commission colleagues? All right, seeing none, Clerk Bowman, please call the roll.
Mayor Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Decker. Yes. Commissioner Hess.
Yes.
Commissioner Juarez.
Yes.
Commissioner Pradel.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cooney.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. The ordinance has been offered for first reading. And now we do have an item H5, which was formerly G7 on the consent agenda. Manager Ritzma.
Approval of a 2-year contract with Solenis LLC for the purchase of Z-Tag 8816 polymer in the amount of $1,955,355.28.
Thank you very much, City Manager. Commissioner Pradel.
Yeah, I pulled this item just because I thought it was particularly interesting. Just the creativity being used by public services in terms of creating this. And I was wondering if Director Baker, if you wouldn't mind just kind of briefly talking about this and what went into this process. I know that part of this was that there were like 5 different polymers tested to try to see effectively what would be the most cost-effective removal from the wastewater plant and whatnot. And so I wasn't sure if you could speak a little bit about that process and why we were doing that.
You want to come forward, Director Baker? He never misses the chance to talk about polymer.
Well, I thought this was a particularly cool example of where, you know, we have city staff that are thinking very creatively to find solutions. I think the reason this is particularly interesting is because if you look back earlier this year, we had a supplemental for disposal services, basically, because you know, fuel charges and what they were charging us went from like something like $4 to $8 or $9 million, if I'm not mistaken. So I know this is all kind of mixed into that solution making to try to be more efficient with our dollars. So
He got so excited, he got stuck in his chair.
Welcome, Director Baker.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, City Manager, City Attorney. Thank you, City Commissioner Prado. Bit of a technical question, so I'll try to hurry up and get through this here. So the polymer is a chemical, a water treatment additive that we use within the solids handling process. It's a coagulant that gets fed prior to the centrifuge. Before this contract, we were on belt filter press polymer, so it's a little bit different process, and we're using a little bit different chemical makeup, if you will. So all those polymers that were part of our bid process had to go through performance testing at the wastewater treatment plant. So in that performance testing, we take the polymer that the bidder is essentially bidding, and we put that in our process, and then we measure our ability to make solids through the centrifuge. So the higher the solids content or the lower the water content really is the driving factor in performance. As you stated, we have pretty high sludge hauling and disposal costs, so that those costs are, we don't anticipate those costs to go down, but it's just a matter of continuing to optimize those. So we don't want to pay more than we have to. So this is essentially a classic example of optimization. We have inputs into a process, and we have an end goal. The end goal is to lower the amount of dollars that we're spending in the overall solids handling process. And so, you know, this is one of many inputs to that process, but again, we're looking to optimize that and get an out-the-door cost that's the most economical for our ratepayers. So that is kind of what is behind the recommendation, what drives the recommendation that's before the commission tonight.
So basically, it's whatever polymer you pick is what can extract the most water from the cakes that get shipped away. So it's kind of like when you see the commercial and it's like laundry detergent, and it's saying like, well, you know, you're paying for 80% water when you ship it. It's kind of the same with the cakes that we're, you know, shipping out. You know, the more water we can extract, the more economical it is to extract and ship those out, right?
Correct, and we want to draw attention to the fact that we're optimizing the entire process. There are cheaper polymers. So if you looked at the bid tab, you know, there were polymers that may have had an advertised price that's cheaper, but if we go with that, we'll be paying more in the landfill. So it's important to look at all the inputs to the process and optimize the process so that the out-the-door cost is the most economical.
Thank you, Director Baker, and thank you, Commissioner Prado. Does anyone else, just before we leave, Director Baker, I know you might be surprised by that, does anyone else have a question about ZTAG 8816 polymer? All right, seeing none at this point, I guess you are. All right, done. Thank you.
Thank you.
So with no more questions, now is the opportunity for anyone in the audience who would like to comment on this item, formerly G7, now H5, under the regular agenda. If you want to make a comment, please come to the podium, state your name, whether you live in the city, and you'll have 3 minutes. Seeing no one, Commissioners, the recommended action is a motion to approve item G7, now H5, and authorize the city manager to sign all related documents on behalf of the city. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Vice Mayor Cooney,
Support.
supported by Commissioner Juarez. Any discussion? Clerk Borland, please call the roll.
Commissioner Decker.
Yes.
Commissioner Hess.
Yes.
Commissioner Juarez. Yes. Commissioner Praedel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cooney?
Yes.
Mayor Anderson?
Yes. Thank you very much. The motion has passed. Next, reports and legislation. Manager Ritzma.
Thank you, Your Honor. We do have a quarterly report of the Odor Task Force for the third quarter of 2022. Director Baker is here to answer any questions. There will not be a formal presentation.
Questions at this juncture, Commission? And how can people get access to this quarterly report, Manager Ritzma?
Mr. Baker?
Well, I guess, sorry about that, Director Baker.
Good evening, Your Honor, City Manager, City Commissioner, City Attorney. The report is available in the packet. That's one resource. However, all reports going all the way back to the beginning of the Odor Task Force reporting, quarterly reporting that we do, is available online. So we'd encourage folks to go online, citykalamazoo.org, and within your navigation of the site, there's a site dedicated to Odor Task Force. And within that dedicated Odor Task Force site, you'll see all these reports, and then as well as links to odor observations. That's where you can make us aware of an odor that you may have observed in the community. And there's also links to EnviroSuite, which is the real-time odor monitoring application that we have. So we would encourage folks to go to that resource. There's a tremendous amount of functionality that EnviroSuite now has, so that you can see each one of the sensor locations will give you a readout in real time. You can click on that sensor location and it will give you a trend of the near term. I think it's a few days or a few hours. Also, there's the annual average you can see within that. So you have to kind of toggle on the graph and it'll show you a little window that says what the annual average is for that location. And then within that web link, you can go up to the upper right-hand corner, and there's some drop-down menus for reports. And then within the reports, there's, I forget what the number is, but there's a list of options to trend and graph every sensor that we have in the network that we've had since September 2019. And then when you build a report or a trend, you also have the ability to extract the raw data from that. So you could select tab data and get all the tabular data out of that as well. So again, citykalamazoo.org has got all of the website information on it, and it's under the Odor Task Force, and a lot of information there. So any other questions?
No. Yes, Vice Mayor Cooney.
Thank you. So this is about odor. It's not about health. It's a whole separate thing. I read the report. What I didn't see in there is, in your opinion, is the odor getting less?
Yeah, that's a great question, Vice Mayor. Generally in the report, we see our role as providing information of our status on the work we've done and the data. So you don't necessarily see us give narrative opinions within that. I would say that the best resource available is to look in the trends and chart progress. There is additional information that will be coming out in terms of the health studies that's going to be coming out. We saw updates at our Environmental Concerns Committee, where Michigan Department of Health and Human Services came to those meetings and addressed those committees. So we anticipate to get those reports in the first quarter of January. And again, this is work that we've been engaged in for a number of years now. We're committed to, and we've got a number of projects that we're continuing with that work. I would say, just from kind of anecdotal observation, it appears that the numbers are starting to trend down, but that is, anecdotal in nature. We haven't really have a finite report that quantifies that. It's a bit of the numbers are moving. The data, we continue to add data points, so that's some relevancy has to get looked at there in terms of we could show you some data points that haven't been around very long, so we're continuing to build and gain information from that. So again, it's work in progress, and we continue to do that work.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Pradel.
Question for you as well. I'm trying to remember back with this, but going back to like when Graphic Packaging had first asked for like tax incentives, I thought this was like one of the stipulations of doing this report was based on that tax incentive. They this year didn't come back to request a tax incentive, if I'm not mistaken. So have they still seemed willing to, contribute reporting or their, end of the report each quarter, even though they haven't come to us to ask for that tax break this year?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is some connectivity between that work and the odor task force, although it's important to note that the odor task force did exist before that interaction was created. So, there continues to be a positive working relationship between the city and Graphic Packaging International at a technical level as we work together to continue to resolve, the odor challenges. In terms of continuing to do those reports, we leave that up to the commission, city manager for the direction we see. But at a staff level, we continue to do that work and interact with staff from Graphic Packaging as well.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be great continuing to have that dialogue and reporting from the company, even if they're not getting an incentive. The other thing I was going to ask as well is I noticed in the report it mentioned that there were some, like, I don't know if I'm using the right terminology, but like some issues with the EnviroSuite stations, especially the ones that were like solar and having to like, kind of like almost like outages, if you will, on some of them because of like power issues. Do you know if they're having we're having any success with those issues and resolving any of those at all?
So I would just say broadly, this is some new technology. We're really on the forefront of being able to measure this stuff in real time and broadcast that information out to everybody. Like any instrumentation or mechanical thing, there's ups and downs. There are times where sensors are unavailable for a number of reasons, some of which I don't even understand. So the power issue is one. We've also had a lot of vandalism. So there's been at least one location that for whatever reason has seen its fair share of vandalism. So that's a challenge as well. So we continue to work through it. We continue to get great support from EnviroSuite. We also have within our process control technician group, we've got staff that will go do an initial response to a work order request to go verify a number of parameters before we then escalate it to EnviroSuite. So there are a few things that we can, address in-house, and then we are expediting a lot of those work order requests up to EnviroSuite. And, like any agency, there's, challenges that they face as well with, resources and staffing and everything else. I will note too that this year is our first year where we've gone full scale with EnviroSuite. In the past, this has been a pilot, so we've kind of identified them as a potential solution for the city. We stepped into a pilot agreement with them, and then now we're moving forward with a full-scale implemented contract. So, we're going to continue that, and we should continue to see success from EnviroSuite. Overall, I think it's an excellent resource for our ability to trend, to graph, and to have this bank of information that's available. So it's something that we really never had before prior to 2019.
It's also probably nice that we have so many of them so that if one goes out, you still have multiple sites that can measure and everything too. So that's one nice about the diversification of sites and whatnot too, so that if, one or two go out, that there's still options to measure things and whatnot. So that's great. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for Director Baker at this time? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Manager Ritzman.
Thank you, Mayor. That concludes my report.
So next we have an item of unfinished business, right?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So we've now had two opportunities with the commission in the past couple weeks to talk about the proposed 2023 budget. And on the 5th, we had a presentation by our CFO, Steve Asensi. And then last week, we had a 3-hour work session on the budget. We commission received a presentation from staff, a lot of rich questions and answering time. Now, we thought it would be good to have an opportunity for the commission to discuss amongst yourselves, with staff's assistance, of course, any changes you would like to see in this coming budget for 2023. And then ideally, if we could have those tonight, we can then move forward with preparing the final budget that gets approved in January. Have those changes reflected in what's brought forward in January. So.
Okay, thank you, Manager Usma. So, is there anyone on one of my colleagues here that would like to begin that discussion? Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing that, I've heard and talked to my team members about, and really, when you look at what our community needs and what our businesses need people that are able to come to work. Individuals aren't able to come to work sometimes because they lack childcare. I am making a proposal that we spend some of our ARPA funds on early childhood care, or just early childhood areas. So we can help our most vulnerable, which are children, have access to great daycare. I think within those funds, we would be able to start some programs, again, wherever they are placed. I know whatever organization or whatever department, kind of handles this, I know they're going to put it to best use. But again, I think, investing in some of these home daycares that we may have, so individuals are able to get licensed, kid-proof their home, so they can hire staff, so they would be able to keep more kids. So then that way we have individuals that can take their children to a safe place and be able to go to work and provide for their family. I think we should use some funds for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker. Other thoughts, conversation? Vice Mayor Cooney.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're proposing there. I think we should look for that for early childhood. I have a couple questions. And we looked at this before, but I'm looking at the ARPA funds, and it's over $900,000 a year for ARPA administrative and program costs. That seems like a lot of money for me. Could you speak to that, or somebody speak to it, Jim?
Sure. I would have ask our CFO, Steve Asensi, to come forward and talk about the administrative costs.
So the administrative costs are using that federal de minimis 10% that we've talked about for any grant. To go along with that, the alternative is that we could charge direct time from staff to the ARPA fund to make up for the time that they're spending on ARPA instead of spending time on other activities. And so these administrative dollars are going to the general fund, and through an indirect route, they're also helping provide those staff services for the ARPA fund, but also allow us the capacity we need to add to the general fund. As you see in there, there's a new accountant position proposed, and there's a new purchasing position proposed. Talking about $40 million that needs to be accounted for, and contracts and purchases bid out. So it's, and then also additional work that's being done by city staff that if they don't have time to work here, then they don't have time to continue that work that we're budgeting in our other funds as well. So it kind of goes all together, and it's maybe not necessarily always a one-for-one relationship, but it does help support those internal staff and those staff that are working on ARPA funds or on other city projects to make sure that we have the capacity across the board.
So, okay, I hear what you're saying. It just seems almost like it's double dipping. We're already paying for staff, and now we're going to put another money in for that. Now, I know it's extra work, but I don't know, that just seems like an awful lot. $900,000, that's for the next 4 years, that's almost $4 million. It just seems a lot to me. I hear what you're saying, and I'll think about it.
Okay, and yeah, and I get where you're coming from. Like I said, it's kind of the federal overhead rate that we're allowed to use, and we use it in a number of other grants as well. It's just kind of paying ourselves back for the work we're doing across the board to make sure we have that capacity. So I'll just leave that there.
Okay, when I just think about the needs, the city, and what we're talking about when we just heard a couple of weeks ago that we have 32% of our kids living in poverty and 43% of our black kids, and then we look at that, I'm looking for some money to try to invest in that situation.
Other questions, Commission colleagues? Yeah, Commissioner Pradel.
Sure. I'm going to echo Commissioner Decker and Vice Mayor the early childhood. I'd love to see some resources directed to that. When you look at our 5 priorities, I think it's pretty easy to make the case that in terms of creating economic mobility and trying to enter the work, major barrier that a lot of young families are facing, and young parents especially, is trying to figure out how to work when you got to figure out how to take care of your kids and keep your kids safe. I know firsthand, I have 3 children at home, and I know the tremendous amount of stress that my wife and I had calling, dozens of places trying to find placement for our, newborn once we were ready to both go back to work, and, hearing from them that there's wait lists of 9 to 12 months, and then, going to visit sites and being like, oh my gosh, like I would never leave my child here, but then having to think to yourself, like, I got to pay my bills. So am I going to make this choice? Thinking about, how far a lot of parents have to go when transportation's an issue. Sometimes transportation, if the closest place you can find is Ashtimo or Comstock, you don't have something right in the neighborhood to provide your child reliable, safe care. So to me, it really fits the economic development bucket. It certainly fits youth because it's setting our children up for safe options, for readiness for school. To me, it's also housing because, again, it's providing added value to living in a neighborhood to have access to affordable care, and it's certainly safety as well, making sure that our kids have a safe place to go and something positive or productive to do, when they're not in school. So I can't think of a thing that's one of the things that is as great of a need in our community right now than finding some way to help either be a contributor towards that solution or be a catalyst for that solution or a convener to that solution. But, it's just something I keep hearing over and over from parents. And the other thing, too, is it's one of the few issues where you have the business community is in alignment, lock and step with, social justice groups. It's a pretty universally accepted demand that people have, and it's largely a exacerbated cause of the pandemic, which is, why we have ARPA. So I would be really in favor of trying to find resources for that.
Commissioner Hess.
Indeed, agreed. I'm on the legislative committee of KC Ready Force, Kalamazoo County Ready Force. Mainly that's for 3 and 4 year olds, but birth to 3 is also an issue. I know that the city has been in talks with them. We don't know where that's going. We don't know what is going to be happening with KC Ready Force, but I think in terms of business development and small business home care should and would in some way be supported. But the city could and should be a convener of early childhood education.
Commissioner Juarez.
Sure. I just want to extend my appreciation to the staff and all the people who worked on getting all these numbers together and, the work they've been doing throughout the years. And seeing ARPA as an opportunity to supplement and give us, that opportunity to work through what we got in 2023 with fresher breath air, right? ARPA, that's what it seems like for staff, if I'm articulating it correctly. But it is a fresh breath air for our staff to see that amount of money, be able to use it in ways where it continues to build upon what we're doing in Kalamazoo. It continues to establish the notion of Kalamazoo becoming better for all, right? And so I do appreciate the work that's being done, but again, we have these conversations, and it's a one-time shot with ARPA. It's not like it's forever money. And so as we spend it, and we spend it wisely, and we, hear and honor the request of staff and that team that puts this stuff together, and then we're trying to, hear the concerns of the community, it'd be very diligent of us to figure out those few points that we can say, let's see ARPA money go here. Like, I do agree with early childhood development. Super duper agree with that. Financial literacy, that's a huge thing for me. We need to start teaching people, like there's that saying, you give a man a fish, he can feed his family. You give a man a fishing pole and teach him how to fish, he can feed his family by himself, right? So, like, what does that look like for us to encourage financial literacy, right? And I think we can find some avenues to put some of that ARPA money towards at least scratching the surface of poverty, right? Because that's where it's at, like when I was taught how to budget my money and to take care of, my bills, and, the poverty mindset is go and buy what you want and beg for what you need, right? And those who take will never have enough. Those who give will always have too much, right? And so it's one of those things where we have to change the mindset when we're talking about poverty, because poverty is a huge thing for me, right? But I don't think we're going to solve poverty with ARPA dollars. We can put some money towards it to start the ball and get the ball rolling, and in those directions we're really concerned and need it the most. So I do agree with early childhood development and financial literacy. If we could find some places to really invest in that, and if that's the neighborhood associations, carrying that load, if that's certain nonprofits, whatever it is, let's put some efforts there.
Appreciate it, Commissioner Prado.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is important, though there's some intentionality to, is that, with the ARPA, we have to figure out how we're going to spend it by the end, or by 2024. We have to spend it all by 2026. So how do you spend it in an efficient way if you want to address something like early childhood without creating a cliff? So creating something that you're not sustaining. So the question is what strategies can we use that we are a propellant, or be, again, use something creatively so that it keeps the momentum so that somebody else can, own it. So if we know that there's a shortage of workers, maybe it's supporting, creating training readiness so that when other partners are expanding early childhood, that there's the workforce available to do that work. Or, again, the thought about the home-based grants. There is economic opportunity there where, you could create early childhood centers within the neighborhood, providing grant dollars like you would any small business to help the home get up to the requirements for licensing, get the licensing, hire additional people. Those kind of ideas where you're not creating an artificial cliff, but supporting the idea. Or maybe it's just providing the initial startup funding and knowing that we provide that first push and then the other partners take it from there. I just think that there's a lot of opportunities. And then you'll have people who will challenge it and be like, well, the city of Kalamazoo shouldn't be in the business of educating our young people. There's people who educate our young people. Well, it's a very politically divisive issue in K through 12. If it was an easy issue to solve, K through 12 would have solved it by now. And there's not a whole lot of communities that can claim that from birth to college that we're going to provide that care for our kids. This is an opportunity for us to be bold and stand out in the country and the world. And the other thing too is, if you want to make the case about it's not our business to do, you could look at any of those SDK issues that we had earlier in our community, the whole meeting, even providing bus rides for kids, in school. I mean, well, that's technically not the business of the city of Kalamazoo to do that, but we noticed issues in our community and we solve them. That's what we do. And this is an issue that real families and real people in our community are facing. And so I think we should heed that and do something about it. So.
Vice Mayor Cooney.
Thank you. People have been laying the case very nice. I don't think that we in the city are going to solve, and none of us do, the early childhood problem. What we can do is we can be catalysts to bring people together in our community. We are very fortunate to have in this community experts who would really know how to structure this. And I think the question that we have to ask ourselves is, do we have some resources that could start the ball rolling, that people could build on, that could show our commitment as a city to do this, and then get the experts to tell us what it will take and how we could move forward on this, and how can we use some of this money to attract other money to do what really needs to be done to create a universal child care program for the city, early childhood program for the city. I think that's what I'm hearing people are looking for.
Commissioner Decker.
Thank you. I kind of want to echo what Commissioner Juarez says and Commissioner Praedel. You know, it is about those home-based businesses. I feel that really going big and bold with home-based businesses and getting entrepreneurs in a place and giving them assistance and backup, per se, a little bit of financial help from organizations, you know, hopefully they would be the each one teach one, as you're saying, you know, then they're going to be able to catalyst what they have learned into something else and then grow their business and also teach someone else what they have done. And then that way that opens up their expertise and they're also talking with other individuals. So I really think that I'm looking at the report or the presentation that we had, and we have on the slide that says the economic vitality, and I remember Dr. Mitchell saying that, you know, we're not going to start home-based business, you know, programs until about 2024. You think about that, that could take a year to get into place. So, you know, let's start now with some of those funds. I know City Manager Ritzma is looking for us to allocate funds, so I think we need to decide, you know, what kind of funds we're looking to commit to this, to commit to the future of our children, to commit to the future of our residents within the neighborhoods and within the community, to commit to the businesses so we can get individuals out there into work and being able to go there and know that they have a safe place for their kids. So I think, you know, just to begin, because, you know, as we've been told, there can always be amendments mid-year throughout the budget process. I say we start, I'm looking at 1 million, something like that, or so. If you guys think it should be more or less, or I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Okay, so I'll just jump in on this a second then. So just things, just a variety of ideas about this is that grants and the 900,000 for admin. So we're going to be paying that one way or another. We're not paying people twice, right? So people's salaries are being paid. And what is helpful about this grant allowing a 10% admin is that you don't have to individually track every hour, correct me if I'm wrong, CFO, that 10% is a minimum that you can just bill for your time without having to spend time with cost allocation or all kinds of complicated hour tracking kind of scenarios. We don't use it for that. Well, then we'll just be paying for city staff with our general funds. So that's an effect. Every decision we make, when we're saying we'll spend it here, then we're also having to say, so we won't spend it here, right? It's a kind of a zero-sum game in that way, is we have a pot, and we are making choices to take it from somewhere. And this isn't, you know, a free lunch thing either. If we decide, okay, that's the line item that we're interested in, I mean, we could say that, but maybe another way to approach it is just say, all right, you know, there's some number where would be the best place for that to come from in the estimation of our city staff, rather than trying to just kind of reach in at this moment and say, oh, okay, we want it to come from that spot. What makes the most sense in terms of everything we're trying to do, which is come forward with a balanced budget, spend wisely, take care of our city in the way we need to. So more thoughts along those lines is that, I mean, I see there's certainly a general sense that, you know, childcare is an important issue, although we've also brought up financial literacy you're talking about, but general sense across the board that we care about childcare. Now, though, you know, and I think it's been very appropriate that you said this, Vice Mayor Cooney, none of us are going to build and create a program. And we've had some different thoughts, well, maybe we should do it this way. Maybe we should, you know, Commissioner Decker's talked about, well, we should, you know, help businesses, you know, home-based businesses do it. We should do this or that. We don't know right off the bat here, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean 20 businesses? Is that $5,000 per business? Are we talking about 10 businesses and $50,000? I mean, we don't really know, and there's no use us trying to just kind of pick that out of the air. So maybe a way to approach it is just say, okay, here's a dollar amount that we'd be comfortable, and you're talking about bringing experts in the room to help, which seems like a very appropriate thing for us to ask for, which also means that if we do that, that's not going to happen, you know, in the first week of our fiscal year. So that is something that might happen as our fiscal year progresses over January, pulling people together, coming up with a plan, coming back to us with a plan, deciding what that might be. So maybe just for, you know, just trying to be most appropriate from this place for city manager staff, you know, rather than saying, okay, well, let's do this exactly, this particular thing in this area, let's do that, and just trying to decide that right now, that we just say, okay, here's some money, what feels like a comfortable amount, and remember, we're also going to have ARPA money in '24. It's going to have to be allocated. We're talking about '23 budget now, and we have through the end of '26 to spend this money. So this won't be the last time we can ever have that discussion. We're just talking about '23 for now. That if we give some sense of what seems like a reasonable amount and ask our team to say, okay, hey, we're proposing this is how we accomplish that, that maybe that would be something that we could do, you know, that would just set that placeholder aside in our budget. That all said, I know we'll come up with something, but we're going to want to come up with something and just not sit on it and find ourselves in this position a year from now saying, well, hey, we had set that money aside and not much of it got out the door, or we didn't land on this, so we're definitely going to want to focus on helping all of us convene folks, you know, to come in with something that, you know, meets the requirements of our procurement process and whatever ARPA allows and all the needs that seem to be met. Commissioner Pradel, I saw you.
So one of the leading experts in this topic, Dr. Tim Bardick from Upjohn Institute, he estimated that, you know, at best case scenario, if you were to start to implement planning now, the earliest that you'd be able to start executing some of this work is fall 2024. So that gives you the sense of the urgency of like kind of laying your claim in the sand here and figuring out what we want to devote to this, because if we actually want to make you know, measurable impact or do something that's a catalyst to make the change, you know, if we wait a year, you're talking then fall 2025, and then if you wait 2 years, you know, it's a problem that exists now. Like, you know, in an ideal world, we would have like figured out how to solve this as a community 2 years ago, right? But here we are, 2022, about to be 2023, and what I hear, you know, this leading researcher saying is like, you need to start figuring this out now and how you're going to allocate this, because otherwise the issue is going to compound even worse by the time you can actually start to see measurable impact with it, if that makes any sense. You know, and I think like the same way that we have the 10% de minimis, you know, we don't exactly know how that's going to get allocated, but we're just estimating because we think that's what we need to do. And, you know, I think the same way that we, you know, tackled gun violence and we impacted the youth, you know, it seems like those are like 3 issues that we've kind of settled on as things that we'd really like to focus on. And it would be great, in my opinion, if we could, allocate a significant amount similar in size for each of those three issues for, each of the remaining years of ARPA, would be my thought. And, because we got to figure out how we're going to use it by 2024. That would be my thought.
So I have to think about this a little bit, how that, in that scenario, how that's affecting our 23 budget. But I don't know, Manager Rissman, you want to
Sure.
weigh in on this?
Yeah, so I mentioned this the last week at our budget work session. So, and the mayor said it earlier, the focus right now is on the 2023 budget, and you have, before you a recommended list of over $13 million in uses for ARPA. That means that there's 17 million remaining to be allocated. And the way we laid it out, we had the programs and then, 24, 25, 26 years. Those are just for us to start, talking about and planning for. They certainly aren't in stone, so monies can be moved from one year to another, could be brought up from 2024 to 2023 if need be. So what I would suggest, and this is great discussion and help for us, is we focus on 2023 with the understanding that we have dollars in 24, 25, and especially youth development, we have a $3.5 million total for that. Plus we have other programs that in 24, 25, are listed as well. And then we have our retreat in February, and certainly we can discuss more because that's talking about 2024. And then we can really have a good discussion and guidance from the commission in preparation of the 2024 budget. So, the amounts between the years are fluid. Again, we just presented those to have a discussion and a framework. Ideally, this is staff recommendation, but we understand that, there's a lot of need and flexibility needed, so.
Commissioner Decker?
So just to clarify, I don't know if any of you guys still have your packet from the last meeting. What I'm understanding is let's start looking at this 2023 line and see where we can pull some funds from to start with our early childhood development. Is that what I'm hearing? Start looking at this, the 2023?
Well, I think you would, 2023 budget, if we could, agree upon, the recommendations there and saying, okay, 2023 settled, with the understanding of saying we still have 2024 and 2025 to discuss and to allocate other funds that aren't just in stone just yet. 2023, we should be settled on that now. We should say, okay, great job, budget presented, recommendations for 2023, done, right? Because we have that opportunity to do that right now. But with that understanding of saying, okay, 2024, 2025, we got options to talk about that. But it's up to us to start planning for that stuff. I think it's super important for us to start planning about it.
I would suggest, just to repeat myself a little bit, is that we don't have to tell administration, absolutely take it from this spot.
No.
No, we can just come up with an amount, and so we don't have to do that budget calculation, that we're kind of at the tail end of as far as grab it from there. We can just say, okay, if there is a 23 imagined commitment of an actual real investment of a plan and something to do in this, category of things in 23, then do we want to say we want to set aside some money, city manager, please find it. It's your job to do that. Find it in the budget and then come back and, bring that revised budget to us. Commissioner Prado.
My one ask would be, you mentioned the $3.5 million for youth funding. To me, that is vitally important. We, have expanded availability to positive direction, opportunities for youth during the summer. So my hope would be it wouldn't be a scenario where it's oh, well, they're talking early childhood, so now we're going to take a little bit from, the $3.5 million youth funding, because that's technically youth. Like, I think like what I hear the commission saying is like, over the last like year and a half, we've kind of coalesced around like three major issues: youth, gun violence, and early childhood. And so like, I think, if I'm kind of understanding and hearing everybody, if I'm off base here, let me know. But like, I think the idea would be is like, each of those would have a decent sized pot to tackle, unique to themselves, if that makes any sense. Am I saying that right?
Right, and I don't think we should say, okay, well, let's look at next year's budget to make that commitment no, we need to put aside some money this year toward this early childhood, and the city manager's in a position to try to figure out how to do that. And then we'll use that to build on, then we can begin to, we've already had conversations with some of the experts, you know that, and to bring them in and say, okay, how do we move on this thing? How is the best way we can do this? But I think it would be significant if we said, we are setting aside this amount of money for this year, and we're hoping to set aside much more in the future to use that as a catalyst to bring other people together to get an early childhood plan for this city, which is revolutionary.
Attorney Robinson.
I want to echo the remarks of the vice mayor, because there's been some ideas thrown around, and he's talking about generalities and giving the manager, the staff, some general direction. And I want to caution you about some of the ideas that have been thrown out in terms of, well, this is a way to approach it. And I say that for basically two reasons. There is a restriction under the Michigan Constitution that you can't use governmental money for a private purpose. And that constitutional provision is given some enforcement legs by the Michigan Department of Treasury, because there is an audit manual that our finance department must follow, and they specifically say you can't make donations to even, certainly not a for-profit organization, but also to nonprofit organizations, unless there is a payment in exchange for services that the governmental entity would normally provide. So that's important. You got to have what is called a quid pro quo in terms of an exchange of value. You just can't say, oh, this is a good idea, give money to this organization. And in fact, the regulation that's developed by the Michigan Department of Treasury says this prohibition includes churches, veterans organizations, community organizations, Little League, Boy Scouts, et cetera, et cetera. So a good example might be, Millwood Little League needs some improvements to its fields. Oh, this is a great youth type of thing. We can't give the money to Millwood Little League to improve their fields. That would be an inappropriate donation to, if you will, for a private purpose, even though it's a nonprofit organization. So I just want to give you that kind of general background as you're thinking about, oh, how can we do this? Don't get into the specifics. As, again, the vice mayor indicated, you're talking about generalities, giving some direction to the administrative staff, and then with those constitutional and legal restrictions, we can maybe figure out some way to go forward.
Mayor.
Yeah, Commissioner Hess.
Yeah, agreed, and yes, convener. I think that's the best role for the city, is to really go out in the community, convene the folks, maybe at a COW. I think a COW has been, Committee of the Whole has been suggested for bringing the experts in this field to actually have us see the need. What would it take? $1 million, from what I hear from Tim Bardick, for early childhood education, for 3s and 4s, universal in the city of Kalamazoo or in KPS, $10 million a year. We don't have that. So what would it take, and how can the city be a catalyst and a convener for that? And I would suggest that we put in the budget that that's what we look at, that the cost of convening and then supporting whatever is legal.
Other thoughts on the topic? Yeah, Commissioner Praedel.
I mean, I think that there are a number of instances that you could look similarly like that we, have tackled. I mean, we're giving out small business grants to businesses, facades, I mean, you could make a case of why that's good for society or community, but I mean, I could go on with dozens of items and listing of like aspirational things that we're funding from, economic development to, youth programming and stuff over the summer. So, I mean,
I'm not sure if the microphone's picking up as much
sorry.
for people watching, yeah.
Sorry, but, I guess what my point was is like, I agree, like, there needs to be some latitude for you to look and see what the best solution is forward, but I think there's plenty of examples of uses of funding that we've used that have, spurred development or spurred, small business or supported youth or, whatever that, that you can turn to as examples of how we've, supported initiatives or needs in the community without, like to your point, Clyde, about, doing a wrong approach with that.
Yeah, Manager Rispa.
Yeah, so I think this has been really helpful, and I like the idea of us being able to go back and figure this out with the $1 million or so. There are trade-offs if we do more in early childhood, where is staff gonna not spend their time doing? So we need to have those conversations and understand, and that'll be part of what we bring back is, how we can account for that $1 million and, what would have to give. So we can certainly do that.
Commissioner Decker.
Thank you. So I was also doing some research, kind of looking at some things as it respects to our seniors. We do have a aging population. Everywhere has that. We also have seniors that are still living in their homes the best they can. I really believe that, and I think City Manager, we talked about this earlier with Director Lamb, preserving the home stock that we already have. And I feel that if we're able to continue to assist seniors stay in their homes, do some, not per se the city, but organizations that work within the city, stay in their homes, do a little bit of the upkeep, heaters, whatnot, things to make them safe. In turn, what that's going to do, I believe, is possibly open up something for something that Commissioner Praedel had talked about earlier, which is home share. And also, it's going to keep our housing stock from being depleted, from being torn down, from being deteriorated. And I do believe that, we really should look into some funds. I know we had it, I believe it was last year, the $200,000, and I kind of looked in this year and I did not see it within the 2023 budget. I think that also speaks to the vitality of our neighborhoods. It speaks to, the core neighborhoods and the neighborhood facades and keeping that up. People are building homes, nice and new homes, but yet we don't want to neglect or forget about the homes that are there that have individuals that are paying taxes, that are living there, that are struggling, and that are not able to upkeep their homes. So I really think we do need to take a look at finding some funds to, I believe it was, and one of the spreadsheets that you sent me, City Manager Ritzma, regarding keeping a certain amount of funds for seniors. I think it was 23 grants at $7,000 each equals about $200,000 for seniors. And again, I think that kind of brings up something, again, as I'll say it again, that Commissioner Praedel talked about. I think you said it was happening in Ann Arbor, the home share?
The home share program in Ann Arbor.
Yes,
It's through their, I think their senior services like equivalent in Ann Arbor.
Senior services equivalent. But when you think about that, and you think about also in respects to the gentleman that came in and talked about rent being $1,500 as a Western student. When you have that, now you have a home that is still in good shape, that may have an aging individual that is in that home that may just need a roommate or someone to help with. And you can step in any time if I don't say this right, Commissioner Praedel. But then again, that also opens up a unit, shall you say, in a home within the city of Kalamazoo. For some of our residents that, don't have a family and are single and that just want a space, that want to have a roommate or something like that. So I really think that we need to find some funds to keep that program roaming, because I think that program running, because I believe it is beneficial to our community.
Commissioner Juarez?
Yeah, I had a question about, this is not about the budget, but I'm sorry about that. But we had discretionary dollars as a commission to spend throughout this year. Do you know how much of that we spent?
I do not off the top of my head, but we can certainly find out.
But didn't we put,
Steve, do you know that? Okay,
We'll figure it out.
okay.
Gershon,
Yeah, out of 100,000,
we spent maybe 50, 60,000?
yeah, we can look at that, but yeah.
Okay, and so then, if we wanted to spend more money before the year ended, or figure out if we had some money to spend somewhere, we could do that by just contacting you or we have to make that decision up here?
You have to.
I say that to say because, being stewards of money is one of those things where we had an opportunity to spend $100,000 on things that concerned us, right? And we didn't even do that. And we talk about these bigger issues, and these issues like they're like the problems of like now. We know, like a lot of times we know the statistics about a lot of the stuff that's taking place. But I want us to be mindful as I speak to us as colleagues that we had that opportunity and we still didn't do too much with it. This is probably our last meeting for the year, right? And so I say that to hold us accountable also when we think about aspirations, or we think about people in need, and we think about the $40,000 that's going to go back to general, because it doesn't roll over though. No, it doesn't.
You want to speak
To
to
my
that,
understanding,
Steve?
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
to my
right.
understanding, it doesn't roll over.
It only rolls over if you committed to something. So in the prior year, we had committed to some gun violence, and that had rolled forward to be used. But without a commitment, we typically don't
Yes.
roll that over.
So, and I just say that because $40,000 is a lot of money. It is. That could help so many different people in so many situations. That could put a new roof and a couple furnaces in houses. That could put a new kitchen and cabinets in a couple different houses. I want us to be mindful, because we can't go to one extreme and say we need to put money all over here and here and here, but still neglect the fact we have $40,000 we didn't use as commissioners. And I'm with you guys. I'm in that same boat.
So our next, Commissioner Hess?
How can we use some of that 40,000 that's left to fund next year's Shop with a Senior? Can we do that?
So, I guess that's another item for the budget, I could say, is the idea of including
We do, but.
a rollover of this amount of the commission allocation.
Well, I think we need to take what we're hearing this evening and bring it back, and we can do it as part of the budget, related to the 40,000.
Sure.
at least.
So, two questions. One in for my colleagues and on the commission, and another one for city manager. First, I'll ask you, city manager, do you feel that this discussion has been helpful?
Yeah, I think to the extent that we're hearing now what the commission would like to see with these dollars, we can certainly, we have enough, I think, to go back and then come back with, how we anticipate allocating $1 million and how that would impact potentially other areas. And we can bring that forward to the commission.
Okay. And then commissioners, do you feel like you've had the opportunity to communicate in a way that Manager Risman seems to understand here? So our next meeting is our actual budget hearing. And then we won't actually be voting on a final budget till our second meeting in January. So our next meeting is budget hearing, and so we'll be coming back to that. We'll be a modestly, adjusted budget relative to the items we've talked about tonight.
Correct.
Okay, is everybody comfortable with that? Okay, super. All right, I'll set. So we have one other item of new business. Two, do we? Let me see. Oh, yes, okay. So I want to make sure that this is correct, but we are now in a situation where James Porter, Attorney James Porter, who we voted to offer the position of city attorney to, has gone through an extremely extensive background check and successfully completed that background check. So the next step in that process is a discussion about negotiating a contract with Mr. Porter for the job of city attorney. So related to that, Mayor Charisma, do you want to read the motion?
Consideration of a motion to direct the city attorney recruitment subcommittee to begin contract discussions with James Porter, with the understanding that a draft contract will be submitted to the city commission for formal approval if all due diligence investigation steps are completed satisfactorily and agreeable terms and conditions of employment can be reached.
Thank you, Manager Charisma. Attorney Robbins, do you have any remarks on the need for this motion?
Not really, other than you got to negotiate a contract, and so you got to delegate that to some group of people or person to engage in that process, and so as to bring the contract back to the city commission for approval.
All right, so just as a reminder here, there's a subcommittee that's been involved in this process. Is everybody comfortable with that subcommittee continuing on? Members of the subcommittee? Okay, and that subcommittee is? I'm on it. Commissioner Decker is on it as well, and Commissioner Pradel. All right, so there's a motion on the floor. Is anybody willing to provide support for that motion?
Support, yeah.
All right, make the motion, I'm sorry.
Move.
So Commissioner Waters is making the motion, supported by Vice Mayor Cooney. Other discussion?
Is there a timeline for this? What is the timeline for this?
I think it's ambitious, but I'm hoping that we can, and this will all depend on how much notice Mr. Porter feels he has to give and the extent of the discussions, but I'm hoping that we can have a city attorney in place in time to at least shake hands with City Attorney Robinson on his way out. Now, Attorney Robinson has indicated that the end of January is your hard stop date. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And thank you. So that's the goal. All right. Let me see. Is there just an item that needs comments from audience? Not sure? Okay, not required to then.
You can ask for it. There's no harm.
Okay, great. Anyone in the audience that'd like to comment on this item? See no one, any more discussion? Clerk Bowling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Hess.
Yes.
Commissioner Juarez.
Yes.
Commissioner Pradel.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Cooney.
Yes.
Mayor Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Decker.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. The motion passes. Next is an item of new business requested by Commissioner Decker. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Since I've become a commissioner, I've heard a lot of things on both sides as it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I just spent a lot of time, I'd say the last month, kind of really going through our city charter and seeing what was in there, what was not in there. And when I had heard Mr., I believe it is Waldron, is it the gentleman that was here earlier? I don't know if he's still here. Talk about certain things and talk about reports that have been done 10, 15, 20 years ago, and here we're doing the same reports. And again, former DEI Bonner, just hearing things and also having our employees having to go through so many assessments and tests, or not tests, but just questions, asking the same repetitive questions. I feel that us really looking into what the process of incorporating a DEI position into the Kalamazoo City Charter and what that's going to mean for the city, what it's going to mean for our employees, team members, trying to use more inclusive language going forward, team members, and for the city moving forward. So City Attorney Robinson, thank you so much for all of the information that you put within the Friday email. And I'm wondering, just to make sure I don't mishap anything, if you could kind of walk through the process of getting something possibly on our ballot to have it incorporated into our city charter.
Certainly, thank you, Commissioner. It begins with drafting a resolution containing the text of a proposed charter amendment along with accompanying ballot proposal. Your resolution would set forth the exact language to be inserted in the charter. Now, that's where the hard work comes in terms of what do you want to put in the charter. In all due respect, Commissioner, you've made some general statements, but I don't know what that necessarily means when you start putting in charter language. And let me just step back just for a moment. The city charter it's very akin to the state constitution or the federal constitution. It is the intention of a constitutional document is to give broad, general ideas and discussion and set forth some standards and leave the details to statutes and ordinances and the like. And so I unfortunately, and there's been some conversation in law journals and the like in terms of, particularly in Michigan, how because of the initiative in particular in Michigan, how Michigan voters have kind of taken the Michigan Constitution and made it more like a body of statutory law instead of constitutional law. So I want to caution as to how much detail, what do you want to say in terms of drafting that resolution? So that's you have to give some real good thought to that. But assuming we can get to that point, then once that's drafted, it would come before, and there's some things you have to make sure you do, some things under the Michigan law and again statutory law and how you amend the charter. It must be limited to a single topic. If there's more than one kind of change that are related, you might need to break it up into two or more questions, and then you have to oftentimes tie bar those so that if one fails, they all fail, kind of thing, so you don't have inconsistent results. So that you have to be careful of that. And then when it gets come to the commission, it takes a 3/5 vote of the city commission to put it on the ballot. But that's not the end of the process. Then it has to go both to the governor and it has to go to the attorney general. The attorney general technically will be making sure that it complies with the statutory law, that is the caption doesn't exceed 100 words, that what is being proposed is legal and the like. The governor also does a similar type of review in terms of, yeah, is it consistent with Michigan law, the Constitution? Is it consistent with the Home Rule Cities Act? And while that's the governor's role, the governor will rely upon both the governor's counsel to the governor and the attorney general for some of those questions. Once the governor gets it, one of two things can happen. The governor can approve it, and it will go on the ballot. If the governor decides not to approve it, it comes back to this commission, and then you can either, if I don't want to say override the governor, but you could, and put it on the ballot anyway, or you can say, oh, the governor had these objections, we're going to make some changes in response to those criticisms or those critiques, and we will then can put it on the ballot. So that's, and then once it gets on the ballot, it'll be voted on by the city electorate. If it passes, then it becomes effective generally after the Board of Canvassers certify the results that it passed. If it doesn't pass, then that question can't be returned to before the voters for another 2 years. So that's kind of roughly how it works. The key, as I said at the beginning, is figuring out what it is you want to do and putting the right language in there so that it reads, so it gives you does what you want to do, but often also permits you to some freedom, some latitude, some discretion in terms of how the position would work and what the expectation is. You don't want to necessarily write something so strict that your hands are tied and you find yourself, ooh, I'd like to do this, but the language doesn't permit it, kind of thing. So that's just a little bit of, there is, if you will, a lot of art, if you will, than science when it comes to drafting a charter amendment.
Thank you, City Attorney Robinson. So I guess, I'm kind of gonna ask my team members how we feel about this. If we'd like to maybe possibly form a committee to make sure that as we're talking about this, or whoever maybe with City Attorney Robinson, that we are looking at it, as he says, with different things and really giving him the information and what we want this amendment to read like, with his lawyer expertise in keeping us legal.
If I may, there's another option, and I don't know that you necessarily have to put it in the charter, and this gives you the greatest flexibility, is make it an ordinance. And that means that it's more easily amended. You don't have to go to the electorate. This body controls that ordinance. And again, it gives you the flexibility, so if you do want to make a change, it's easier to do so. And quite frankly, if you had a DEI ordinance, I think the concern would be, well, what about a future commissioner or commission repealing it? Practically, I don't see that as something that would necessarily occur. I mean, quite frankly, there'd probably be a lot of people voted out of office if that occurred, and the new group would instantly re-adopt that ordinance. So I think as a practical matter, I think, and I just throw this out for consideration, an ordinance approach might be better than a charter approach. Because again, you have control over it, you don't have to, and who knows, what does it look like if you do a charter amendment and it kind of squeaks by? Not that it would, who knows, but stranger things have happened. What does that say, if you will? And you know you're going to get some nay votes. So what do you feel comfortable with a charter amendment that's approved by 51%, 61%? Do you need 81% to make it feel like there's a statement there? And again, that's can be problematic. And I don't know that I necessarily like the optics when you say, oh, we're going to have a DEI amendment and it only gets, let's say 60%, that means 40% voted against it. And so I throw that out for what it's worth, and you can consider that. But if you decide to do a committee or a subcommittee that would work on this, I think maybe that's something you don't want to necessarily say, we're committed to a charter amendment. Let's look at other options that might be available to us.
Thank you, City Attorney Robinson. Thank you for that other option as well, as regarding to the ordinance. I do appreciate that.
Just a thought myself, Commissioner Decker, about that other option is that since you have been reading through the charter quite a bit lately, I'm glad to hear that. I think there are positions that are mentioned in the charter which do not exist, and we don't fund them. So just because something's in the charter also doesn't mean that future commissions, it doesn't bind future commissions to funding that position necessarily. There are still, other kind of avenues to diminish it, even if it's in the charter. And you read through our current charter, sometimes you wonder if it weren't so difficult, we might go through and clean up some things that are in there that are a bit of an anachronism. But that said, I do think it's worthwhile considering an ordinance. Another part that you did not talk about, of course, is that as you go through this work, there's a period of time when you have to, put something on the ballot, decide when it's going to be on the ballot. There are only certain times that there are elections when you're going to do that, so there's a whole strategy in thinking about that as well. Where
if you did this, it would go on next November's ballot. That's the next municipal election, and that review by the governor and attorney general, they like to get that work done at least probably a good 90 days before the thing goes on the ballot, because as the clerk will tell you, there are deadlines that clerks have to follow in terms of printing ballots and getting them out to absentee voters. And with the recent change that occurred in this most recent election in terms of absentee voting, there's going to, the paint's not dry yet on those changes, and I think the city clerks, not Mr. Bowling, but city clerks and township clerks across the state are still figuring, what do we have to do in the next year if we have municipal elections, and certainly in the next 2 years when we have a presidential election, a general election type of thing. What are the challenges going to be that we have to prepare for, begin to prepare for now? So I say that not necessarily to dissuade you about putting it on the ballot, but know that there are some, as the mayor indicated, there are some deadlines. And so if you have an idea, the sooner the better you can get that to the attorney general and the governor, because this is a municipal election year, there will likely be a glut of charter amendments by other municipalities as well. And it takes time to work through some of that. Now, that said, I'm fortunate to have a good working relationship with the assistant. I don't know why he hasn't retired yet either. He's older than I am, but he works in the municipal law section of the Attorney General's office. I can pick up the phone and have a conversation with him in terms of things. And so, but most recently this past year, there was a advisory that was issued by the governor and attorney general in terms of saying, if you've got ballot questions, get them to us sooner rather than later, because there's no guarantee we will get our review done in time for your ballots to be printed. So just a word to the wise.
Thank you for that information, City Attorney Robinson. It is good to know all of the team members that it will affect, if something like this, when this will be coming to fruition. So I'd like to get some input from my team members and how they feel.
Commissioner Decker, I hear you, and I know that you want it written into the law of the city, what should be written in our hearts. I am happy to serve on a subcommittee to explore whatever option might be available to try and move it along.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the background as well. I would have never thought about the ordinance versus the charter amendment. The one thing that I think is somewhat appealing about thinking about the ordinance option versus the charter amendment, which I'm not, I'm open to looking at avenues and exploring and seeing more. But one of the things I was thinking about recently is I was thinking, like, if you think about in the last 5 or 10 years, the terminology for LGBTQ, well, now there's IA+. And say if we made a charter amendment and just did LGBTQ, as time evolves and that terminology changes, or word uses and what's considered acceptable or the inclusionary changes, how do you do it in a way that doesn't set yourself up where 5 to 10 years down the road you're excluding somebody? And a good example, I was just thinking about this, is I'm noticing at work more and more that for DEI, that belonging is becoming a part of that terminology to use in terms of like what you're creating in the workplace. And so, that wasn't even really floated around 2 years ago when people were starting to use DEI much more frequently, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and not knowing what terminology, 5, 10 years down the road, maybe one of those terms might not be, the term that people are using anymore, or, or maybe it's excluding elements that people consider down the road. And so, I think that trying to figure out a way to make it kind of universally understood that irregardless of what it's called, what are we trying to achieve, whether it be a position or a department or that's focused on blank, that keep things focused enough but broad enough that it doesn't necessarily maybe exclude people that we didn't think about in the future, if that makes any sense. Or so that was one of the things that just kind of came to mind. But again, I think it'd be worthy, to explore, what options might be available, and I'd be happy to support in any way possible as well. So.
Well, Commissioner Decker, I think you have your committee.
Yeah.
If you're okay with that, Commissioner Fredo volunteered, Commissioner Hess, unless...
No, I'm not going to volunteer to be on the committee, but I do have some comments. I think part of the trade-off between when you talk about ordinance or it being in our charter is, like Don Cooney always talks about, we want to be looked at as what's Kalamazoo doing. We want to be the trailblazers, right? Like, I don't think a lot of municipalities are talking about putting DEI in their charter right now, right? And so that's unique, right? That's putting a stake in the ground and saying, like, we're committed to this work so much that we're willing to put this in our charter. That's a statement that we owe to our people, right? I think one. And then that being said, if it goes to that, it's in stone now, right? It's not like we can, but you generalize the lingo to make it suitable for all, right? I think that's where you can find yourself getting around those, like, well, if things are added on in later years, right? You generalize it in a way where it's talking about all people, right? Because when you think about DEI, it's not just about the LGBT community, the Black community, the Hispanic community, the homeless community, the disabled, veterans. Like, it encompasses so much, right? And then it gives you the ability to lever the extremism between, like, indoctrination of, whoa, you need to understand what we're about and accept us one way or another. Oh, it's general. It's like you belong. And you belong in this sense because you're part of this community of people who are trying to better themselves. Not putting one group of people up here, one people here, we're taking the back of the line because somebody's issue is more important. But we're looking at it from a sense of saying, how do we go together on this journey and make it to our destination, right? Together, right? And that's the belong together thing that I really feel we lack, because it gives us the ability to determine that, right? And so I think, it being part of the charter, great idea. If that's the best route, let's do that. If it's pushing the envelope for other cities to be that way and say, hey, we need to consider, Kalamazoo's doing it, We had a bunch of people call about when we're doing the marijuana stuff, right? Like, okay, what's Kalamazoo doing? Okay, what are you guys figuring out? How do you guys see it portraying in your city? But being a trailblazer for is always cool and unique, you know what I mean? At the same time, it's a big statement. It's not just a little thing. We're not just talking about like potatoes. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Juarez. Commissioner Decker, are you comfortable with the idea of a subcommittee getting together on this, or you have some other ways you'd like to approach this?
I believe that we are missing Commissioner Hoffman. Thank you, Jean, for offering to be on the committee with me. I'm not sure if Commissioner Cooney would like to say anything before I go on, or?
No, I think it's a great idea. I think it would set an example for other cities. It would show our commitment to that this is so important to us that we want to either enshrine it in an ordinance or in the charter. I don't know. To me, the ordinance is quicker. It makes the statement, and it would be real. So I would favor the ordinance because I think it's easier for us to do. We control it, and it makes a statement that we want to make.
Attorney Robinson.
And if I may, and the remarks of the Vice Mayor reminded me of this, when the city recognized civil rights for the LGBTQ community community at that point, that was the 4 letters that were used, LGBT, and that was done by an ordinance. And we were probably at least first in Kalamazoo County, and I want to say we were certainly within the first 10 maybe,
in the state, yep.
Cities to do that. And I don't know that any other city did it by charter. They wanted that flexibility in the ordinance, I think for that very reason, that it does make a statement. And we, when I say we, the city of Kalamazoo, pulled other local jurisdictions with us eventually. If Kalamazoo can do it, why can't Kalamazoo Township? Why can't the city of Portage? And so we were in the vanguard locally just through an ordinance. And I'm not suggesting that that's the way, but I think that offers you more flexibility, and you can make just as strong a statement in that fashion.
Commissioner Pradel.
One thing I was just going to mention is that, like, for instance, Commissioner Hoffman's not here. Like, one of the things that sometimes bothers me is if we are too rash about picking people to serve on committees just because, I make a comment doesn't mean I need to be the person to do it if somebody's more passionate, and sometimes, somebody might need a second to think about it, whether they want to do it, because if they're going to be serious about it, it might be a time commitment,
Sure.
So I don't want to just, I would love to, but I also don't want to exclude somebody else who didn't, get to jump to it before me or something like that. And I think sometimes I've seen that happen with us where it's people get super trigger happy to be like, oh yeah, I'll serve, but then it's maybe somebody else wanted to, and I didn't, you don't want to miss out on somebody else to do that. The other thing too is I think one of the things that could be really valuable with that subcommittee is that, sometimes you want to be the trailblazer, sometimes you want to be the first one to do it, and you really want to make a statement. But, sometimes too, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like maybe somebody out there has already thought through a thoughtful way to do this in another community, maybe not even in the state of Michigan, but maybe there's something that we can garner or learn from other places that are doing something similar or have done something similar or have explored it and learned from them as well. So I think there might be, 1 or 2 ways to look at that about how we approach it, and that might be where it's helpful to get subcommittee support. The other thing too is the Michigan Municipal League. I can't remember what it was that we were working on. I think it was on the First Amendment subcommittee. But they have a policy lab, and I remember when we were looking at policies for that First Amendment subcommittee, we reached out to them and asked them do you know of anything that's going on in the state or ideas or whatever? And they shot back some pretty cool resources and ideas that we could use for that group. And that's a resource that we're a member of that we could potentially ask for support to see if they have any awareness of other things that are happening in the state of Michigan as well.
So maybe we can leave it, I'm sorry, Commissioner Decker, you're going to say something?
Yes, I was just going to say, thank you, Commissioner Prado, for that. I do have the MML written down, and also, I believe it is NBC Leo is another place I can look at, National Black Classes for Local Elected Officials. So I believe that's also a great organization that I'm going to try and utilize. The subcommittee can try and utilize to gather some information. And I do agree with you, Commissioner Prado, we do need to maybe wait for a moment and make sure we're able to offer this to everyone that may not be here this evening. So I am okay putting City Manager Ritzma, if you would please put this on the agenda for our next meeting, which will be in January, as to talk about the subcommittee. And we can make that, we can get individuals, team members that are looking to work with me on that. Thank you.
Sounds good, Commissioner Decker. Thank you for all your work on that. Jim Robinson.
And in preparation for tonight's meeting, not knowing exactly where you wanted to go with this, there's a good jumping off point is the executive order issued by President Biden in 2021 entitled Executive Order on Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility. And it is a 14-page document, single-spaced, that at least is a starting point. I'm not suggesting we need a 14-page document, but I think there's some ideas that could be gleaned from what's already been done at the federal level, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
That's what I have. It's got a hard copy. It'll soon be in your hands. So I think this also ties back to what Commissioner Prado said, is I have also heard the terminology beginning to be used, DEIA, as well as DEIB, separately. So it's that idea of don't create something for yourself that may be an anachronism in 5 years or in 2 years. So just to be conscious of that. Manager Isma.
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate this discussion. One thing I've learned through the subcommittees we've had, the First Amendment subcommittee was mentioned, is if a proposal could come back for like the charter of the subcommittee that outlines, you know, the what and then timeline and all of that, that really helps kind of structure things. So the subcommittee knows what it's charged with and what the commission expects will be brought back to them, and then we can work from there. So that could be part of the first steps of the subcommittee to work on.
All right, Commissioner Decker.
I just have a real quick question. Thank you for that, City Manager Ritzma. Do most subcommittees bring that information forward to the commission?
We did with, I believe we did with the First Amendment subcommittee.
First Amendment? Yeah. Okay. But say, I'm just kind of verifying to see, you know, if all of the subcommittees put into place?
I'm just recommending it. I mean,
okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I was on the subcommittee that came forward with the fairly groundbreaking work where we expanded protected classes, the One Kalamazoo business, which was on the ballot. We went through an extended process on that one of the City Commission passing it, a referendum that overturned it, forcing us to vote again one way or another, which we can get into the whole history of this, but we voted it down to give ourselves time and then voted for it again once it had been modified, which then ended up going to the ballot. So that can be a long, long process and not always simple and as you'd like it to be. So, but we came forward with a time frame, a real specific recommendation, and that was certainly crafted in the forge of a very extensive public comment opportunity for folks. That all said, thank you once again, Commissioner Decker, for doing all the background work you've done on this and initiated the work of the city attorney here to bring us some real information on how that process works. Now we are to the time for commissioner comments. Does anybody want to start us off this evening? Vice Mayor Cooney.
I'll be
thank
fast.
you.
I'll be fast. I just want to mention that tonight we voted to take a grant that we got and apply it to Urban Alliance. And last week, I had the great opportunity with Chief Boyson and Mayor Anderson was there for a while, to watch a graduating class from Change of Status. And it was such a wonderful thing. People were dressed so well, their families were there, and for some of those people, that was probably the biggest thing that ever happened in their life. And they were so proud, and it was just a wonderful thing to see the work that they do and what a difference it makes in people's lives. I thought that was great. And then yesterday, I had the opportunity to go to the Mothers of Hope annual Christmas party. And there were 40 kids there running around and happy as they could be. And there was Charles Parker with his Santa Claus whiskers on, and so everybody was sitting on his lap. And it was just great to see those kids and to recognize the wonderful work that Mothers of Hope has been doing for so many years.
That's amazing. Thank you, Vice Mayor Cooney. Other colleagues?
I'll go.
Commissioner Hess.
First of all, just an announcement that the EPS foam recycling that was mentioned in our committee of the whole today as an environmental initiative that began here in Kalamazoo is happening December 31st at Mayor's Riverfront Park from 10 to 1. So all that gifting that happens often comes with styrofoam packaging. Please, 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 if you're not in town or can't bring it, please find somebody that can come and bring it to Mayor's Riverfront Park on December 31st from 10 to 1. And big gratitude, shout out to the volunteers that help take that in and get it in that truck. We did lose a life over the weekend. I believe it's Deshaun Omar Jones to gun violence. And, thoughts and prayers don't work unless prayers change people and people change those things. So one of the things that we can do, one of the things that's out there, one of the tools that's out there is the Gun Violence Prevention Survey that is on the Kalamazoo Community Foundation website, and it's also on the city social media. So please go and what can you do? And answer, what can you do to help eliminate gun violence in our city? I want to thank Jeanette Sage in the clerk's office for shepherding folks to carol around the Christmas tree here at City Hall. It's a festive time to get people together in the city to celebrate and to bring the light, as Deacon Schmidt also said. So that is happening. If you feel so called, please join from 7:30 to 8 o'clock in the morning around the Christmas tree in the atrium, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday mornings. And I know that our city celebrates not only Christmas, we celebrate Hanukkah and Kwanzaa. We will all celebrate in the coming New Year together with a great New Year's Eve fest here in Kalamazoo, complete with fireworks. But I wish all the love and light and joy that these holidays bring to all of our residents and all of the people I am so privileged to serve with and for in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hess.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Just waiting here.
I do have to echo Commissioner Hess, I'm proud to have so many dedicated team members here within the city of Kalamazoo that are wanting to grow and to move us forward. We had the presentation earlier today that talked about the connected cities for all. We should strive to be a connected city in our everyday lives. It is good to hear, again, some support, some not so support for the bike lanes as it comes with that connected city, and I do believe that once it's more of a norm and individuals get used to it, we will see more people using those bike lanes. I will say that we are still waiting the report from MDHSS. As Director Baker said, it should be here in the middle of, or towards the first quarter or sometime in January. I did follow up with some individuals in Lansing. They also reiterated the same thing, that it should be here sometime within January. I also wanted to let our community know and our team know that I did request that once that report comes out, we want to have MDHSS here to educate our community and to educate us onto what that report really means. I know it's been taking some time, but again, hopefully they've reiterated it'll be sometime in January. I know that's something that's heavy, that's weighing on everyone's mind, and everyone wants to know the outcome of what that is. I want to give a great shout out to our team members on our city team. You guys have done a great job within the budget. I know we sit up here and we talk about things and we want to change things and move things. We know that you've heard us. We know that the things that you are planning are also for the best or for the betterment of the city, also for the betterment of our community and for the betterment of our residents. So just because we may change something, don't think that we don't ever treasure and appreciate you guys fully. I would wish everyone here in the city of Kalamazoo, all over the world, a happy holiday. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker. Commissioner Prado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a moment of reflection here, but one thing that's different each time we switch and have a city commission election, we change sides. And I used to have my back to the windows, and one of the things that I just love sitting here during the holidays, looking at the beautiful city park and all the lights outside, and you can see all the flurry of activity and kids running around out in the park, and you know, it's just kind of a magical thing to see out the window. And so I want to take a pause just to share what I see and with that. And thank you so much to Parks and Rec and Public Services for all the work they do to make our downtown such a magical place during the holidays. But it's a good reminder too. I always, my dad, who worked in mental health as a nurse for a large portion, always reminded me that although the holidays are an incredibly happy time most of the time for our family, that for a number of people that sometimes can be a really hard time of year. And so for those people who are struggling or have sadness in their heart this time of year, just know that you're thought of and you are wished well. But I do certainly wish everybody a very happy holiday season. Speaking of hardships that some families face, Commissioner Hess talked about a young man, 17 years old, lost his life on Friday, and we on the commission get in pretty real time updates of major events that are happening in the city. And when you get a text like that there's a 17-year-old in our community that's been shot, your heart just stops. Because all you can think about in that moment is just that chaotic scene and that young person's life that's forever changed. The young people and the family and friends that are around that scene, the public safety officers that are a part of that scene, and whose lives will be forever changed, and not to mention the 16-year-old who's in custody today, forever changed. And so that's just an important reminder that just to continue to think about people who that this is not always the happiest of times. It can be a hard time for some people, and they remain in our thoughts, and certainly all those involved in that young person, both the young person's lives, know that we are holding them close in our thoughts as well this holiday. Really want to take a chance to thank city staff again for just an amazing year. If you didn't get a chance to tune in for the committee of the whole meeting and see the Imagine Kalamazoo presentation, just incredible work. Neil Conway put together just like this minute-and-a-half video montage of just the spectacular work that happened this last year. And, you know, from what I hear from city staff from that presentation, they say that 2023 is going to, you know, take it one step up even from 2022. So encourage you to look back and see all the spectacular work that happened this year. Cannot thank city staff enough for their work, you know, for the men and women who are going to be working again during the holidays every time one of those water mains breaks or an emergency happens, that are going to respond 24/7, irregardless, you know, of what any of us are doing. Thank you for your service over the holidays. And to my colleagues here, I just want to really thank you for just being incredible people to serve with. It's just truly an honor. And I hope all involved with the city and with our community have an opportunity to rest and reflect over the holidays and have a great holiday season.
Thank you, Commissioner Prado. Commissioner Juarez? No? All right. Thank you. All right, so this is our last meeting of 2022. We won't see each other until next year. And I actually have a few things to go through tonight, but one thing I want to say that is, from my perspective, an amazing, amazing opportunity. And that is this, is that I get to spend a great deal of time with organizations, large and small, all across this community that are doing community work deeply. You mentioned Mothers of Hope, for example, that's doing that work. And sometimes we can sit up here and think, well, it's kind of like us, you know, doing the city stuff and what's really going on, you know, we're in this space. But it's just a reminder of the tapestry of community involvement that happens every single day. And that's really what I want to lift up with this list that I'm going to go through, which is by no means comprehensive, but it's just a last week list sort of thing, which goes on. And there were a bunch of things happening, which I didn't get to go to. Thank you for bringing up the Mothers of Hope, Vice Mayor Cooney. So here's some of that. So what are some of the things I've done in the last week here? Well, I attended the Kalamazoo Boxing Academy event. Thank you, Mr. Curtis Isaac. Been doing that work for years. Great place that young people get engaged and families and friends come there and support those young people who are spending their time being focused and working out and getting in a ring. And I'll tell you what, it can be challenging to watch, but hugging each other at the end of 3 rounds. And it's a legit event. And how is this? I mean, you see Pastor Zell was there, for example, just watching and supporting. Acting Chief Boyson was there, as a matter of fact. So you're just talking about spending some time in the community, and I can tell you, up until being invited by Mr. Isaac and attending those, really, I really had no idea that was happening in Kalamazoo and how organized it was. And there's a ringside doctor that comes and volunteers his time. Checks everybody before they go in, checks everybody after the fight, is there just in case, obviously. And that doctor is a very accomplished doctor at Bronson who has created a huge successful program there at Bronson. There is no reason he needs to do this other than that's how he engages, one of the ways he engages in community. And he's there doing that work. Bless him for that. I'm not going to mention his name. I don't know if he wants to be mentioned, but I mean, it's really, really impressive. That's number one. Number two, saw the opportunity. Hanukkah started yesterday, and 3 temples in town, Temple B'nai Israel, Chabad House of Kalamazoo, and the Congregation of Moses. The event was led by Rabbi Hannah Estrin down here in Bronson Park, looking at the lights. The menorah is right over here in the corner. And I think it is so important right now when we're talking about the increase in anti-Semitism. And actually, there's been some discussion from people in the Jewish community saying, hey, should I really have that menorah in my front window right now? Is that a smart thing? And to have a large crowd, I'd say 100 people show up to share that, to light that first candle on the menorah, and come together for that in Kalamazoo, recognizing miracles past and that miracles still occur in the modern day. And the Jewish Federation helps organize that, has been active in Kalamazoo for 150 years. Third thing, I got a chance to go to the East Side Mixed Use Project, brand new construction over on East Main. Functional Land Bank, another great organization in town. And East Side's very involved. The foundations are in the ground, and the work goes on. That's going to be housing and community space, retail space as well. Fantastic thing. Another organization. I was going to mention Change of Status event, and the fact there was some funding for that we are moving there that we got tonight. Another great group doing great things. I also want to recognize our Department of Kalamazoo, our Department of Public Safety. We had an officer who rushed into a situation, not waiting for backup. She's not the biggest person in the room, and ran into this setting and realized that there was somebody literally being assaulted, and jumped in to stop that, and as a matter of fact, became a target herself of that assault. And I just want to say thank you to that PSO and to public safety for being there and doing that work and staying involved in the community. I do think we should all mention this, the fact that a 17-year-old died from a gunshot wound has got to continue to drive our thinking and our caring about what we're going to do and what we're going to prioritize here in Kalamazoo. And here is what I'd like to close out with, is that Bertha Barbie McNeil, a member of the Velvets, just passed away this week. She's 82. Not only did she achieve some success with the Velvets, they had some hits, Motown hits, but she went back to school, became a teacher in Kalamazoo Public Schools. She was a teacher for 26 years in Kalamazoo Public Schools. Got her bachelor's degree and her master's degree, taught music, and I think that it would be worthwhile for everyone to go on YouTube and see the Velvets performing Needle in a Haystack, one of their big hits. And you will find that on YouTube. Easy to find, just Google it, and they are performing right over here at the Radisson. Nice Kalamazoo event, beautiful, and I think just a really nice recognition of the Velvets. It's been a great year. Looking forward to another great one together. I love you, Kalamazoo. We're adjourned.